Function that melanin-dominated and melanin-recessive people are definitely different types of people?
Immune function is different. Neurologic awareness is different, etc. Even our circulation is different. And when you look at the need that for every melanin molecule, there's a neuron that goes to it. There's an artery and a vein that goes to it, because that's what's necessary to nurture the melanocyte. Then the structure is obviously different, because you're not going to have the same amount of perfusion of nerves, arteries, and veins to a surface area that doesn't have a melanocyte. And if the melanocyte secretes very little melanin, which is what happens in Caucasians, they don't have the same blood supply. So it's real obvious. This is why Caucasians, for example, it's known that they have a well-developed deep circulation, but a very poorly developed superficial circulation. So therefore, they become very heat intolerant very fast, because they have no way of dissipating the ambient heat that they're absorbing from the environment, as opposed to melanin-dominant individuals who have the melanin on the surface. I told you that the property of melanin is that it absorbs heat and then actually gives it back into the environment. So it actually acts like a cooling system. That's part of what superconductivity is about. And so we can be in very, very warm climates and not find it debilitating at all. Caucasians cannot do that, and the fairer they are, that is, with less melanin, that the granules are so small, etc., they become just prostrate. This is one reason why they find that when it becomes warm, they feel much more comfortable disrobed. Where in Africa, you can go into the deepest part of Africa, and these individuals will have all kind of things on their bodies that Caucasians cannot wear. And as a matter of fact, when we go to Egypt and we're out on the desert, we're not out on the desert with no clothes on, because we find that basically covering yourself is very, very important, because as that heat is given off, you don't want to dehydrate. You don't want to have, you have to maintain moisture. So your clothes become moist underneath, and the skin can stay moist without you having to drink excess water, but the heat is actually dissipated. So any of the Bedouins, etc., you see them, they're not without clothing on the desert. They're very heavily layered. But Caucasians cannot tolerate that when they go into that environment.
Because we are different, so then that means we have to eat, as black people shouldn't eat the same things white people eat.
Of course.
So
that's why dogs and cats don't eat the same thing, and that's why rabbits and squirrels don't.
So we as black folk really need to watch. I mean, they advertise and market milk, dairy, and cheese products.
88% of the African world population cannot tolerate dairy products because they don't have the lactase enzyme to break down the milk sugar. And so, no, after the age of 5, we become very intolerant to that, and it becomes mucus-producing for us. See, this is part of the science known as human ecology. And in conventional medicine, this has totally been lost. And this is why so few people benefit. And when I say so few, I'm saying that any other race that tries to utilize Western medicine doesn't do well, other than the Caucasian. Other than the Caucasian. So therefore, the Orientals know what the medicine is they need. They are basically plant-based because they have melanin, and plants work much better for them and for us, as opposed to a lot of artificially synthetic drugs. So therefore, with this melanin that we have that has propensity to store and to recycle, etc., you know, we can't take in a lot of things that are not biologically in balance. But that is not the situation with the Caucasian. So I'm saying that they can tolerate more of those unique substances than we can. And because we try to ingest them, they have a totally different half-life in our body. Many times they become very, very deleterious, etc., and they really should not be used. So I'm saying that, you know, it's very important that if medicine in general is going to make changes in the world to bring up the quality of health, they're going to have to recognize the uniqueness of the individual and honor his or her anatomical structure and genetic orientation. It's very, very important. I was reading an article here where they were talking about the genome of humans, and they were saying that, you know, out of every 100 genes, every 1,000 genes, it's only the 1,001 position in the DNA that makes an individual different from another individual. But that is important because obviously if you stand me next to a Caucasian female with blonde hair and blue eyes, and here I am with olive brown skin, black hair, and brown eyes, etc., that 1,001 gene is critical, that you have to honor that.
Oh, indeed. And the Whitehead Institute, located just around the corner from where we're broadcasting today, is having a conference starting yesterday all the way through Saturday, talking about the human genome and the genetic differences and the mapping and
the charting. They're almost done with the sequencing.
Right, exactly. So I beg to differ with this gentleman that, he just does not have access to the research. So I don't know if he's melanin recessive or melanin dominant or not, but for my own survival and for my capacity to really make changes in people that my colleagues told were going to die, I had to dig deeper and I had to dig harder to get these answers so that those patients that came to me could really have their life back. And so my reputation speaks for itself that I had to use a different type of medicine, a different type technique, so that these people who have been given a death sentence now are living.
One of the things referenced at the media conference that the Whitehead Institute held yesterday, Eric Lander, the director of the Whitehead Institute, or the Human Genome Project, kept referencing that human beings are 99.9% the same, and most of the DNA strands, most of humanity evolved from 50,000 Africans in sub-Saharan Africa. And so there isn't that much difference between us as human beings. And you just made reference to that, is that correct? But
I just said that they have cited that every 1,001 gene is where you see the difference. But that 1,001 gene is critical for your identity and must be honored. So this is my point, is that we cannot just deal with the 1,000 genes that are alike. Because if you do that, then you're going to kill off everything who has a different 1,001 gene. And that's exactly what's happening.
I also want to reference the conversation that we had with Dr. Eric Lander yesterday, and when we spoke of cancer, and he said that lung cancer was one of those things that you couldn't cure yourself of. Yet, as I read your materials, Dr. Joel Pookrum, MD, PhD, staff physician and medical director of the GNLD Wellness Center, standing for Golden Neolife Diamite, and hopefully we'll get to some understanding of what that is, that you've directed departments of OBGYN at Woodrow Wilson Clinic for the Henry Ford Hospital. You're a graduate of Creighton University School of Medicine, and you've studied and practiced many of the modalities of medicine, yet you yourself used your training and more to heal yourself of lung cancer.
Of course.
How did you do that?
Who have had lung cancer and have healed themselves. And so, look, guess what? When I decided at first I was going to be a neurosurgeon, I recognized that, and no disrespect to my instructors, that they didn't know much about the brain. And my thing was that, I'm not going to be a bearer of bad tidings, that every time I took you to surgery, you were either coming out of the operating room in a coma, or you were going to be a hemiplegic or paraplegic or quadriplegic or blind, or you couldn't hear, or you might not be able to speak. So thank goodness there were other people like myself in that specialty that forged forward and said, yes, we can do this in a different way. No, we don't have to have everybody in a coma. And thank goodness now neurosurgery is something that you can look forward to and not come out basically a vegetable. Hear me very clearly, is that there's no such thing as a disease that cannot be healed.
Hallelujah.
And this has been the problem with my colleagues, because they have the nerve to make these kind of statements and they don't even know the human body. So every time they talk about the fact that, we don't know, or if you don't know, then you have to shut up and be quiet and basically then ask to be shown and truly and can never learn to read or write. You don't have to basically remain dyslexic and think that you have to take a job or something that's less than you. And I'm tired of my colleagues sitting up so arrogantly making these statements and holding people back when it's a lie. They need support and they need guidance and they need people who can talk to them, who've studied their anatomy, because they want to know themselves, and they'll go to the cellular level, the atomic level, and beyond to make the changes. So, this is foolishness, and it needs to stop. We're in a new century, and I'm telling you, you're going to see the dead rise before it's over.
We love you, sister.
There's no such thing as death.
Oh,